What is up, everybody? Welcome to West Nale Virus. Sorry, my mic was sort of far. Today Caleb is not going to be able to make it, but that's going to have to be all right. It is just going to be me. Going to be a pretty quick episode. If you'd like to follow me on follow us. It's also Caleb. He's just not here. So, if you'd like to follow us on Instagram, we're at West Nale Virus. On Twitter, same thing. Links pretty much all down in the description, but you get it. If you want to find us somewhere, look up West Nale Virus. Pretty easy. West Nale Virus. There you go. So today what we're going to be talking about is Julio Jones. Okay. Julio Jones and where he should be going this year. Julio, if he decides to, not retire, which I think he should give it one more year. But if he decides not to retire, he's probably going to be looking for a ring. He's one of the best wide receivers in the history of the NFL. I'm sure there's some people who would argue that he is the best. I don't know what I think about that right now. You have to give me time to formulate an opinion, but definitely one of the best receivers in the history of the NFL. And he doesn't have a ring. He got one shot at it with the Falcons, 2016. Didn't work out, as we all know, 28-7. Biggest, throwing of a game ever. That being said, we're going to look at his history as a wide receiver throughout his career. There's the word career. Throughout his career, and we're going to look at the circumstances with his team, and we're going to make a determination based on that to where I think he should go. And this is basically just me telling Julio where he should go. If he wants to win a ring. Just I understand a little close to a Super Bowl prediction, but that's not what it is. That will come later after the draft and all that stuff. That being said, this is, you get it. Anyways, so Julio Jones was drafted in 2011 by the Falcons, as we all know. Matt Ryan was his quarterback his whole career up until this past year, where he was with the Titans and Ryan Tannehill was his quarterback. He's had a variety of supporting tight end and wide receiver combinations and a variety of supporting, running backs. But his quarterback has been Matt Ryan all his career up until this past year. And that is important, as you will see. So first of all, in 2011, as far as supporting cast goes on the offense, other than him, they had a very good wide receiver. They had Roddy White, and they had a very good tight end, Tony Gonzalez. The running back was Michael Turner, and he did very well that season as well. Julio played in 13 games, had 959 receiving yards, and I'll just say yards from now on, which was 73.8 yards per game and 8 touchdowns. He was targeted 95 times, which is 7.3 targets per game. So that's a solid season. Rookie, very good. Only wide receiver he finished behind, or rookie wide receiver he finished behind, I should say, was AJ Green that year. So he did very well. In 2012, he had the same supporting cast: Michael Turner, Roddy White, Tony Gonzalez, all pretty much the same team. But he played in all 16 games. Had 1,198 yards, which is 74.9 per game, and 10 touchdowns. He had 128 targets, which is 8.0 targets per game. So more yards, but more games. He had one more yard per game, 1.1. So it wasn't a big improvement in terms of like per game, production, but it's still a very good season. In 2013, he had the same supporting cast, except he added there was another wide receiver. I shouldn't say he added. The Falcons added a wide receiver named Harry Douglas. He had a very good season. He had 1,067 yards. And their running back was Steven Jackson, who did not have a very good season. Julio only played in 5 games this year, though, and he caught for 580 yards, which is 116 yards per game in 2 touchdowns. Not per game, just 2 touchdowns through the season. I believe that is the most in, yards per game in his career, but he only played in 5 games. He had a lot of injuries that year, so it was unfortunate year, but he did well in terms of per game production, and he had 59 targets, which is 11.8 targets per game that he played in. So that's a fair amount of targets. It's actually, I believe, the second most targets per game in his career. Now in 2014, the running back Jackson, Steven Jackson, he had a better season that year. So that's good. I didn't write down the yards, but he did have a better season. I believe he had somewhere close to 800 yards. He had the same wide receivers, added Devin Hester as well, but they lost Tony Gonzalez. So, big loss. Julio played in 15 games, caught for 1,593 yards, which is 106.2 per game, and caught 6 touchdowns. He had 163 targets, which is 10.9 targets per game. So this is kind of the start of the golden age of Julio Jones. Just the best part of his career. It started here about next 6 seasons. I believe it's to 2019. They've done that math wrong. Definitely did, but anyway, whatever. Next 5 seasons would be till 2014, 2019. That's kind of the golden age of Julio. So he's got 163 targets in 10.9 targets per game. The targets per game is pretty important to me, I think, and you will see why. 2015, his running back is now Devontae Freeman. He had a pretty good season. His supporting wide receivers did a lot less this year, and the only returning wide receiver was Roddy White. But this year, Julio Jones played in 16 games, had 1,871 receiving yards, which is 116.9 receiving yards per game, which is the best in his career. I take back what I said before. That is the best in his career. He caught for 8 touchdowns, and he had 203 targets, which is 12.7 targets per game, which is also the most in his career. Now, this will make sense, later on, but the next year, which is 2016, this is the year they lost the Super Bowl. And also the year that Roddy White left. Roddy White left before this season started. His supporting wide receivers, though, did pretty good all around. They all did pretty solid, and his running back had a good season. He played in 14 games, had 1,409 receiving yards, which is 100.6 receiving yards per game, and he caught for 6 touchdowns. He had 129 targets, which is 9.2 targets per game. Now, 9.2 targets per game. This is the only time this team has made the Super Bowl, but his supporting wide receivers did very well this year, and all of them did just solid. I believe it was Taylor Gabriel, Sanu might have been there that year, I think. They all just did really, really well that season, and Matt Ryan spread the ball around a ton, but Julio still got most of the attention. And that's why the targets per game are important to me, because this year, this is 9.2 targets per game. This was the only season that his team made the Super Bowl, but in the golden age of Julio Jones, that is the least targets per game that he got in that entire time. In 2017, his running back tandem did pretty well, which was Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman, I believe. The supporting wide receivers did well as well. He had he played in 16 games, caught for 1,444 yards, just 90.3 yards per game, 3 touchdowns this year. So this year was a little bit of an off year for him, at least in terms of touchdown and yards per game. And he had 148 targets, 9.3 targets per game. So up 0.1 target from last year. 2018, his running back, Tevin Coleman, that year, did just all right. Calvin Ridley showed up this year, though. Calvin Ridley and Mohamed Sanu had 800 plus yards each, both of them. Julio Jones had 16 games and 1,677 yards. So between the 4 of them, they had over 3,200 yards, which is absolutely insane. I mean, did I say the 4 of them? I meant the 3 of them, if that's what I said. Anyways, yeah, 104.8 yards per game for Julio that year. Really solid season. He caught 8 touchdowns. He had 170 targets, which is 10.6 targets per game. Now in 2019, Freeman was the running back again, but Devontae Freeman was, but he did not have a very good season that year. But Julio's tight end, or I shouldn't say Julio, but the Falcons tight end, Austin Hooper and Calvin Ridley wide receiver, did very well. Julio played in 15 games, had 1,394 yards, which is 92.9 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 157 targets, which is 10.5 targets per game. Now in 2020, Todd Gurley was the running back. He had an okay season, but Brian Hill was also playing a lot of running back, and he had kind of a mess season as well. Ridley did pretty well, Calvin Ridley. Julio played in 9 games, 771 receiving yards, 85.7 yards per game, 3 touchdowns, and he had 68 targets, which is 7.5 per game. So his yards per game were way down, but his targets per game were way down, and his touchdowns also went way down. And he only played in 9 games. So 2020, which was his last season with the Falcons, was not a very good season for him. Or for the Falcons. I mean, the Falcons haven't been good in a while. Now, 2021, he moved to the Tennessee Titans. His running back, of course, his quarterback now is Ryan Tannehill. For the first time, he's changed quarterbacks. His running back, Derrick Henry. Great season, as always. Well, I shouldn't say a great season. It was a good season. It wasn't that good for Derrick Henry. He only had like 973 yards, but it was good enough for a running back. And then the backup running backs, did whatever. Not that good, but the other wide receivers didn't do that well. I believe AJ Brown had more receiving yards than Julio, and he only had 800. So they did not have a 1,000 yard receiver. Julio only played in 10 games, and he only had 434 yards, which is 43.4 yards per game. He only caught 1 touchdown, and he had 48 targets, which is 4.8 targets per game. So that is the least targets in his career and the least yards per game in his career, and also the least touchdowns in his career, and also the least yards in his career. Everything is the least except for games played. In the season that he played 5 games, he had over 100 more yards. He had about 60 something more yards per game. He had 1 more touchdown, and he had a lot more targets. But anyways, his year with the Titans was not very good. I can understand why he left the Titans. Now, his best year was 2015, statistically speaking. He had no support, though. His supporting cast, in terms of other wide receivers, other tight ends, other running back, nothing. Not a lot there to help him out. So he had no support, but he had got tons and tons of targets. So that's why statistically that was his best season. But the team that he was on did not do as well that season, which, reminding you, Julio this year, I am sure, or at least I would be if I were him, is looking for a ring. If I were him, I would be looking for a ring. I'd be chasing it hard. Now, his second best season was 2018. He had great support, and he got good volume. So, that's better for the team to have those other wide receivers. And 2016, which is the season that he actually got to go to the Super Bowl, the best that a team he has been on has ever done. He had two other 800-yard. Sorry, that's incorrect. Not two other 800-yard wide receivers. He had. I am sorry. I did this wrong. I wrote that wrong. In 2016, he had Teron Ward was a wide receiver. Taylor Gabriel, Mohamed Sanu, Jacob Tammy, and Levine Toilolo were his tight ends. Austin Hooper was there as well. He did okay. Anyways, he had two other receivers above 500 yards and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other players above 200 yards, with a couple of them being above 400. He had a ton of supporting cast, and Matt Ryan that year passed the ball, or spread the ball around like nobody's business. And to me, that is a very good quality in a quarterback, honestly. I do think it was Matt Ryan's time to move on from the Falcons, or maybe it was the Falcons' time to move on from Matt Ryan. I don't know. But that is something that has always impressed me about Matt Ryan. He can spread the ball around like few others can. That being said, the golden age of Julio Jones that I was talking about, 2014 to 2019, the least amount of yards he had in that 5-year span, 1,394 yards was the least amount of yards he had. He had an average of about 6 touchdowns a game, and he had the least amount of targets was 9.2, which was the year they went to the Super Bowl. Good wide receivers or tight ends, he had every year. He had good wide receivers or tight ends, or at least they did well. A wide receiver or tight end is only as good as their quarterback. And Matt Ryan was pretty good. And he had pretty good, most of the time, pretty good running backs. Now, all that being said, where do I think Julio Jones should go? Knowing all that. So quick synopsis. What do we know? I mean, I know I just sort of did this, but quick synopsis. What Julio wants is a quarterback that can spread the ball around. A solid, obviously you want a solid defense. The team you're looking at needs to be just a solid team overall. And you want some other good wide receivers that can also get the ball. They can spread the ball around. So for me, the top contenders are the Rams with Matthew Stafford. Obviously, that'd be great. If OBJ comes back, you got another good wide receiver. They already have Cooper Kupp, though. They just got blanking on the name. Robert Woods is out, so maybe they could pay another receiver. Probably not. They do got a lot of money in their team right now, but they're a good team, not a bad option. The Buccaneers, I think that's a very good option. They are very, very, very good team. They won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, or I should say last year. And they did well in this past year. Now, a couple of other interesting places. The Saints. The Saints would be very, very good team to go to. The Chargers would be an intriguing team to go to. And the Broncos, I thought, would be an intriguing team to go to, as well as the Colts. The Colts, they do have Matt Ryan, and that's a reconnect with a guy you already have a huge repertoire with. Never a bad thing. They got a great running back, Jonathan Taylor. They got Michael Pittman at wide receiver. They got a few other wide receivers. I'm blanking on names right now for some reason, but they're not bad. The Broncos, Russell Wilson, he's very good at spreading the ball around. They've got a pretty good defense. They've got pretty good wide receivers, running backs, maybe. It's Javonte Williams. So we'll just have to see how he develops in his second year. To me, though, the best place he could go is the Los Angeles Chargers. If I were Julio Jones, I would go to the Los Angeles Chargers. They have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are the two other best wide receivers on the team. That's great. You got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Julio Jones. That's an amazing wide receiver trio. They have a great defense. Their front office has been making great moves this offseason. Justin Herbert, good quarterback. I trust him to spread the ball around at least pretty well. They got Austin Eckler at running back, good running back, very good running back in my opinion. And I think the Chargers are very serious Super Bowl contenders this year. And if I were Julio, I think that's where I would want to go. Now, my second choice would be the Buccaneers. And my third choice would actually be the Broncos, the Denver Broncos. Good team. Russell Wilson now is quarterback. Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy as your supporting wide receivers. Amazing. If you're going to have one last good year, for me, it's Chargers 1, Bucks 2, Broncos 3. I think the Bucks have a great chance to win the Super Bowl this year. I think the Chargers have a great chance to win the Super Bowl this year. And I think the Denver Broncos are a dark horse to pull it out. I think they might be able to make it. Be tough, but they could. So, yeah. Brief synopsis. Go to the Chargers, Julio. They got what you're looking for. That's my opinion. Right there. One and done. I don't know what that means in this context because there's not one of anything. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We both enjoy, Caleb and I both enjoy doing this show a lot. And if you enjoy listening to us do it, give a like, leave a comment, let us know what we could do better. Let us know if we're doing something very specifically badly. Let us know any episodes you'd like to hear. We're doing kind of more specific topics in every episode now. And thank you for listening. Follow us on West Nale Virus. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify. We're on Anchor, all West Nale Virus. And that is about it. Thank you very much. Peace out.